get the hostages out. Let's get the ceasefire done.
But no change in policy in terms of arms and so forth.
No, we have to get a deal done.
Let's talk about this interview. So she gives like a very quick no in her response to Dana Bash when she is directly asked if she would seek a change in policy to condition aid to Israel or stopping the flow of weapons to Israel, given that Israel is currently leading the genocide in Gaza. 186,000 Palestinians are dead per The Lancet. The bodies of more than 20,000 Palestinian children have been recovered. The first case of polio was reported in Gaza in the last week. International aid workers and organizations have been attacked by the Israeli military. Hostages held by the Israeli military in their military prisons have been raped by prison guards. And countless other war crimes have been committed by the Israeli military with the support of the American state. In addition, outside of the horrors currently being conducted in Gaza right now, Israel is also laying siege to the West Bank and terrorizing Palestinians that live in the West Bank too. That is the context in which Kamala Harris said no to that question. And the points that she repeated, hearkening back to October 7th, mentioning the 1,200 people who were murdered on 10/7, and repeating points of debunked war propaganda, and repeating the fairy tale of a two-state solution. Some additional context you should know is that recent polling has found that withholding arms from Israel is wildly popular amongst the entire American electorate and supported by 80% of Democrats. In addition to all of that, genocide in Gaza has had direct impacts on Americans here in the US. A recent poll from Brookings found that prejudice is highest against Muslims in America than among any other group. And the last little bit of context I'm going to give you is that a number of different universities around the United States are actively adopting policies which are designed to suppress and oppress students' right to protest and their freedom of speech. And we're already starting to see violence at the hands of law enforcement on these university campuses, as we saw at the University of Michigan earlier this week. Keeping all of that context in mind, let's go back to that CNN interview with Kamala Harris. Given the polling, given that the university school year has just started, and I can guarantee you that there are going to be students out protesting against what's happening in Gaza, and the encampments will return. The polling indicates that the majority of Americans, meaning the majority of voters, wants to condition aid to Israel and wants to withhold arms from Israel, given that we have all seen a genocide be live streamed directly to us from our phones. So the protests at the university are going to continue, which is going to impact the youth vote. The polling is clear that her position on Israel and arms is wildly unpopular. And I want to take this election back to the context of the 1968 election. We are literally in a moment where history is repeating itself. At that time, the Vietnam War was underway. There were mass protests and encampments and demonstrations at universities across the country. The war was wildly unpopular, so much so that the incumbent president, Lyndon Johnson, ended up pulling out of the presidential race. His vice president, Herbert Humphrey, ended up becoming the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. Humphrey was running against Richard Nixon. Humphrey ended up losing the 1968 election by less than 1 percentage point. Democrats keep telling us that this is the most important election of our lifetimes, and I agree, it is very important. Donald Trump cannot be elected president again. So my question back to the Democrats would be, why are you willing to lose this election with everything that is at stake over your blind commitment to Israel? Kamala is proud of being a prosecutor and, quote, the top cop. Why won't she uphold the Leahy laws of the United States? Simply uphold international law. And furthermore, for all of you out there who are going to be in my comments with your liberal views, trying to make Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim voters feel bad for being turned off by what we are hearing from the Democratic candidate in this election. How dare you say, "What about me?" when you are not willing to stand up for our families who are either being killed in Gaza or our families who are being harassed and assaulted in the streets of the United States over everything that is going on. If you're worried about losing this election, push this candidate further and demand an arms embargo ASAP. Again, going back to the Herbert Humphrey example, he did end up coming around on the Vietnam War, but he came around too late and he lost that election by 1%. And history is set to repeat itself if Harris does not change her policy and her position on Gaza and stop sending arms to Israel. I am launching a Substack next week where I will send a weekly newsletter in the lead up to the election examining this electorate and giving updates on relevant news and analysis like this. So please go to the link in bio and subscribe.